This is the Fight for Your Health, the show that teaches you how to master the fine art of living your life on purpose and have a longer, healthier, and happier life through the martial arts lifestyle. The show is hosted by Professor Buitron and his co-host, Grand Master Richard Hackworth. These two experts have combined their efforts and are on a mission to make the world a safer, healthier, and happier place through the martial arts lifestyle. Now, to tell it like it is, here are your hosts.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you and welcome to the Fight for Your Health TV show. I'm Richard Hackworth here with my co-host, Professor Buitron, famous for his Gloves Off show. And we have a special guest today. And Professor, if you could introduce our guest.
Sure. It's a brother from another mother, and I'm going to say it that way because there's a lot of things in common. And it's funny to see that across the big pond of the Atlantic Ocean, people, martial artists, kind of think alike, and it's wonderful to see that. And his name is Sifu Fanning. Brother, how you doing? You doing good?
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, doing really good. Typical Irish weather at the moment. It's raining outside, and it's good to be inside and talking to you guys. And of course, Richard telling me how sunny and warm it is in Florida doesn't help. But yeah, good to see you guys.
Well, you know, Texas is not that far off. Texas since May to right now. Yesterday it started raining, but
Wow.
we've been over 100 degrees every day, so that's over 40 for you guys.
Okay, I'm moving there next month.
Yeah,
We'd love to
you're
have
welcome to Florida too.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to touch base on the conditioning and the health benefits of martial arts. A lot of people have always seen that especially with the Oriental arts, and we're going to touch base more on the Kung Fu side of things. And if you can kind of elaborate on the health benefits and the conditioning and all that.
Yeah, of course. Whatever you can do. Throw the questions at me.
Yeah, well, I specifically had one area of interest that I wanted to pick your brain on for our viewers, and that is about the health aspects of Qigong breathing. And I know that you're very well versed in the healing arts, the Asian healing arts, and it's a part of your training and your system. And I was wondering if you could share with us some of the details of the benefits of it, and even maybe if you can share a few tips on how to do some of it.
Yeah, well, you know, with everything that I do, again, like I said, it's the hard Qigong is the breaking side of things, then the soft Qigong is the breathing and the meditation side. And it's always good to have balance. It always came back to the yin and the yang. So my masters always believed that the best breaker was also a very good healer. Not necessarily the best healer, but he could be a good healer. And when it came to the breathing aspect, the breathing helped with the breaking aspect. But in everyday life, we put the breathing into our into motion. You know, quite recently I've been working with a guy who has PTSD, and he came to me to help with the breathing and his anxiety. So for him to research that Qigong and the breathing aspect could help with a PTSD and something he's had for 30 years, it was great. Boost for me and again for Qigong and traditional arts again. As we've talked before, you know, it's getting people to stick out traditional art as opposed to a fast fix martial art. And I'm not putting down MMA or kickboxing or anything, but when you've got elements inside the Kung Fu, which I do, you have your Qigong, you have your healing, you also have your acupressure, acupuncture. You start going into the deeper elements of things. But the Qigong itself, breathing, one of the mantras my master always had was where blood flows, Qi follows. So the more relaxed I am, the more blood flows to a particular area, you know, fingertips, toes, top of your head. So when you're breathing correctly, you're actually forcing oxygen to the outer extremities of the body and able to heal quicker. Because as in with the way he explained it was, a bruise is a dead piece of blood, a moment in time, and your body has to deal with it. But the more I force oxygen into the blood, the more the blood pushes that bruise away. So again, it's a healing from the inside as opposed to taking a pill or a tablet for a bruise, it's as beneficial to do the correct breathing to help that process.
Absolutely. And in all the different and one of the different areas within Kung Fu, you see that you see some of the Sifus actually learning and doing the healing, and some of them go more for the lineaments and so on and so forth, and others more for the Qigong side of things. How would you implement the Qigong breathing with, let's say, a karate form or a taekwondo form or not, or a form from another system? Can that be applied?
You know, in all manners. I was talking with a boxer last week. He again, once you employ the breathing and you look at how the breathing works, you think of we go to the Japanese karate systems for a second, and we go to the ki, you know, that big at the last moment that you know, and each system has its own method of breathing. Unfortunately, the students and some of the instructors, they don't pass on the knowledge of what they're actually doing. They're doing it for the sake of doing it, but they don't know why they're doing it. So that's where the Qigong and where I come in with my thing is that for me to be able to get you to break the simplest of materials that we use, which is a pine board, you must breathe correctly to penetrate from the top through the board. So with the incorrect breathing, you might get the break. With the correct breathing, you'll always get the break. So there's a difference. You know, you're taking away that element of, but again, no matter what you're doing, if you slow down a simple karate form, a simple, you know, kata, you do each breath, each movement to a breath, and your breath is as long as the movement, you've now entered into Qigong. And it is that simple. It's how it's developed and how it's given to you in its purest form. My master always said, no matter what you do, the second that I input ki into what I'm teaching, it's impure. It has to be pure. It has to be the same way it was given to me. And it's not my version, it's how it was given to me, because everybody's body moves different. It will adapt different. Some elements of Qigong will suit me better than it will suit you, and vice versa, you know. So for adaptation and bringing it into everybody's system, whether it's kickboxing, boxing, kata, you can employ the whole thing and keep it going at all times.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that you know, the breathing aspects, even in an art that I practice, Hapkido, a lot of that was practiced at the higher ranks because they figured you were getting older and you needed it. And then in the 1980s, as an organization in Korea, they decided, well, every rank needs to do this because they can benefit from it. And it reminded me of something that my Tai Chi instructor told me, Sifu Ju, and he said that the breathing is your healthcare. You know, your proper diet is your healthcare. Your exercise is your healthcare. He said your insurance is your sick care, because when you use the insurance, it's already too late. You know, so to use the breathing and the other aspects as like preventative medicine to stay healthy, I think is a very valuable aspect of the training, and it's something that I wish I had realized sooner, you know, that I would have taught that way from the beginning. But I think that as far as the breathing exercises go, that there's been a lot of studies that show that it strengthens your immune system as well. And people run around talking about the vaccine and all these other medications. And really the breathing would be the perfect way to start, because you have to breathe anyway. Let's just do it correctly and save lives. So if somebody was going to try to get started, Sifu, what do you recommend as their first step?
You know, there's so many different ways I could say first step, because your first step is a conscious acknowledgement of, are you a nose breather or a mouth breather?
Right.
Nose, if you're a nose, the way it was described to me was, if you're somebody who sits with their mouth open and breathes, you're a mouth breather. So you're not using your oxygen as quickly and as beneficial as you could. The nose breather, it takes a little bit longer to go through the system, and it also cools the air and it cools your system. So you're regulating. But like you said, with what's going on at the moment, I really like the way you put that with the sick care, because that is the truth of it. You know, your sick insurance, because you only use it when you're sick. But if you can do preventative, so we take, for instance, you get up in the morning, you stand up. Most people will give a yawn and a stretch. And that's your body trying to breathe, because you've now woken your body up. You're no longer lying stationary. You're standing. Your heart has to pump that a little bit harder. It needs to pump that blood around, and it needs that extra help of oxygen. So you yawn in an effort to pull in some extra oxygen, and you stretch in an effort to put the blood into the muscle. So you know that, and I know that as a martial artist. But how does the person who doesn't do martial art realize that? They've never been told that that's why they do it. They've never been told that's how they do it. My master, up until his death, one of my masters, sorry, up until his death, was every morning he would get up and he had a particular routine where he would put his hands up above his head, make this kind of formation at his highest point, and bring his whole energy and chi down to his right foot, do it again and bring it down to his left foot. But what he would do is, as he lifted his hands to that upward motion, he would breathe in through his nose. And then for the whole movement of coming down one side of his body was one breath outwards. So he was expelling the air as he did it. Then he would stand up and he'd do it. And he would be able to touch his palms off the floor. Like at this stage, I think he was 93. He was able to touch the floor with his palms as he did this breath, and then stand up, and he felt fresh. And the next thing he did, that was straight out of bed. He'd do those two breaths, and then he'd walk straight to the toilet, and he would say that's where he expelled his negative chi. So his next thing was he'd go straight to the bathroom and expel his negative chi, because that was the toxins that had been built up overnight in his body.
Right. And when you see that in boxing, and I'm going to go towards the Western side, you see that in boxing, you see that in savate wrestling, even fencing, those martial arts, breathing has a lot to do with it. I remember my trainer, Professor Richard Richard Sela was a phenomenal athlete. He had the most knockouts ever. He transferred over. He was just a legendary figure in savate. And he was a trainer of the French team when I was part of it, back in the 90s, the whole 90s. And breathing was the main thing. He did not, you see a lot of this stuff in boxing where they throw a jab and all of a sudden you hear, well, it's fine and dandy, but a lot of those guys are actually telegraphing their punch and anything else. But what he was actually doing was, you have to breathe as you're going in there, because not only breathing is, not only, as you said, is regulating your movement and throughout your muscles and making you lax. So in other words, his training was, you have to be very relaxed while you're sparring, and you can't be tensed up, because as soon as you start tensing up with your muscles, the lactic acid starts giving in, and guess what? The oxygen goes in, so you have to be very relaxed. And the breathing was very much part of it, and it was done not so much as road work. It was done more as a sense of you being in the ring, going round after round in a physical sparring match. It was a different type of training. And I see where it's coming from, because you can see with the guys there that start breathing with their mouth open instead of breathing with their air, with your tensed up jaw, smiling for them not to crack your jaw, and you're breathing through your nose. It's a lot more difficult to do. A lot less people do it. But when you get those people that do it in an actual movement setting as that, they're a lot more relaxed at the end of the day. And with those that are sparring around with their mouth open, going, panting that type of way. I'm not talking about because they're exhausted, because they're physically getting themselves exhausted because of that reason. So just a different school of thought. But yeah, I agree with the breathing 100%. 100%.
Well, Professor, I think you make some very valid points, and it is universal across the different martial systems, whether it's martial arts or martial sports. And one of the things I wanted to dig out of Sifu Fanning today was the idea that breathing is natural and that we don't need to train it. I think is false, because as we because of our sedentary lifestyle, sitting at desks, hunched over a computer, looking down at devices, that we don't breathe correctly, that we do have to retrain ourselves. So if you were working with a student who had the condition, and you see it all the time, I see college kids, they're hunched over like this, and they have very shallow breathing because of their poor posture and weakened neck and shoulders. What would be, as a teacher, what would be your first thing to do with them to help correct that, to help them vitalize again?
You know, when it comes to everyday life, okay, so I'm sitting in a position at the moment just so I get a good signal on my Wi-Fi, but you've got so many people who are hunched over looking at their phones. You know, I was recently standing outside one of my schools, and the local bus service went by, and I looked in the window, and there was at least 20 seats, and everybody's just leaning forward playing on their phones. So they're all, none of them are sitting correctly anymore, you know, and I think, you know, I remember in school anyway, some of my teachers, you know, you get a quick wrap of a ruler or something, and you get told to sit up, and why the chairs have backs, and why the chairs have four legs. And the simple things that we never took, you know, a lot of heed to, because we thought it was just a teacher being a teacher. But when you actually learn to breathe correctly, you understand why a chair is the way it is, and why people, like there's scientists out there, maybe not scientists, but there's people out there working on the seat designs, so that when you're in an office, you're sitting in an upright position, so your chest is okay. So number one, we have to look at how you're sitting. Number two, what is your daily routine in terms of sitting forward, sitting up? Where's your TV placed? What do you watch, a tablet, or do you watch a TV? So if I was starting with a student today, I would actually do a quick 5-minute routine with them, where I'd say, right, what do you eat? What do you do? Where do you sit? How do you sit? Do you watch TV lying down, sitting up? So you get a whole picture of that person. Then I can work with them. So now, simple things, putting the hands behind the head. You would not believe how many kids can't put their hands behind their head and pull their elbows back. It doesn't happen because their shoulders have now started to form forwards. So it's almost like a de-evolution, where they're not able to stand up anymore. And a simple exercise, hand in the middle of the chest, hand on the back of the head, and force your elbow back to its furthest point and hold it. Because now you're training the muscles in between your shoulder blades and on your spine to hold your shoulders in the correct position. Now, we've spent years in a guard position for the fighting systems. And again, even the Wing Chun is rolling the shoulders, pulling the elbows. You know, things like this, we've trained our bodies to do these things as part of our martial systems. But at the same time, we need to compensate. So whenever I do a warm-up or a workout with a class of students, so we do a couple of ab exercises. So you might do some crunches, you might do some half sit-ups, some sit-ups, whatever. We'll roll over onto our bellies, and we'll start to do some spinal lifts. And you know, you're working with the erectors and the spine. So what you're doing is you're trying to balance and compensate. At the moment, nobody's compensating. Everybody's leaning forward. Again, like you said, they're at the desk, they're at the you know, doing whatever in college and school. And a simple thing, if a teacher stopped a class of students for 1 year and said, okay, for 1 year, I'm going to set a timer every 90 minutes. You're going to sit up in your desk. We've got to put our hands behind our head, and we've got to stretch. And then we've got to stand up, and we've got to touch our left toe, and then we've got to touch our right toe. You're talking 1 minute complete. That would be the way we could solve a lot of issues in a lot of kids right now in everyday school. And it would take a total of about 6 minutes per day. If a teacher was to set an alarm for every 90 minutes or every hour and say, right, 1 minute, we've got 20 seconds of doing this exercise, 20 seconds touching that toe, 20 seconds touching that toe. You'll also find that productivity. The Japanese, I think a long time ago, started to do before work and during lunch, they would do basic exercise. And again, it could be Tai Chi, it could be anything, but they found that the people were more productive because they had more oxygen in the system, they were more awake, everything was working better, and the brain was firing on all cylinders. So that would be kind of a long-winded way about how I would go about with somebody new and teaching them how to correct posture, breathing. Think about your rib cage is holding your lungs. If your rib cage is under compression all the time from sitting, you're always going to struggle to breathe. You'll never ever get the capacity of your lungs. So leaning back and breathing opens the lungs, opens everything up so that the lungs can move again. So hopefully, we can change one person, one thing. If somebody watches this today after it's released, a simple exercise, taking a couple of breaths, 3, 4, 5 breaths, doing this either side, then do it together. And then, like I said, just touch your toes. The amount of kids that come to my classes right now that can't touch their toes is ridiculous. It's just that they're not doing it. Their spinal flexibility is not there.
But yeah, you're absolutely correct. I think, I guess when we were growing up back then, we had PE. I don't know what physical education in school. I don't know what they're doing now in school. I don't know if they're having it. I mean, things have changed so bad. But I can relate to what you're saying, that when the kids come in, they're hunched over. They're kind of, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it's something that is being produced. Not only that, in throughout the whole spectrum, even in media. If you look at media, if you looked at kids programs from the 50s to the 60s to now, they've become more, especially the young men or the teenagers and stuff. They become, I hate to use this word, wimpy. They've become more fragile. They become more, everybody makes fun of them. You know what I'm saying? Well, before you had a kid, you had the rifleman with a kid with a 30-30 next to him. When you know what I'm saying? You had Dennis Jimenez that was out there breaking stuff. So you had a different type of programs for kids. I guess they're changing. I don't know if it's not only just the breathing wise or what they're doing. I think it's a whole environment that is being pushed or brought forth now. I don't know.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, sorry. I know here during the late 90s into the early 2000s, we had a bit of a boom where there was more jobs, there was more money, there was more everything, and people had better lifestyles. We'd come from a country of having very little to suddenly having some of the big corporations from America came to Ireland because it was they were getting good work, they were getting good pay. But what happened was it became known as the Celtic Tiger era, and that was where the Celtic Tiger was the metaphor around the Irish people of how they came from nothing and suddenly they had houses, they had mortgages, they had good cars, they had. Okay, a lot of the stuff was through finance and through bank loans and whatever. But what also happened was because mother and father were out working all the time, the kids needed somebody to mind them. And what happened was suddenly where there was child minors, there was aunties, uncles, martial arts schools, whatever kids were going to. Now all of a sudden they had PlayStations, they had Xboxes, they had a way of staying in the room for 4 hours so mommy and daddy could work. And again, it wasn't everybody, but a lot of people did. And now what happened, when you think about it, that's 21 years ago, 22 years ago. These are the guys now who are coming into college, coming out of college, but they're softer. They didn't do the rough and tumble. They didn't get, the martial arts training. They didn't climb the trees to take apples. They played games. And they, like you said, they did become softer. And in becoming softer, they also became unhealthier. We now have a nation of okay, I'm carrying some weight, but we've got a nation of obese kids who can't run from one end of a field to the other. Whereas when I was a kid, we didn't have it. So we had a bat and a ball, or we had a football, and we went and played. And for me to go and call from my friends, I had to go 2 miles to my friend's house. He wasn't there. He was in a different friend's house. So that was another mile. And then we didn't find them. So you walked home again. So suddenly you just done 5 miles walking or cycling, to try and find your friends.
Right. Well, I'd like to address a couple of things that both of you gentlemen have said. First, with the professor pointing out that I think culturally, worldwide, there's been a situation where they've made masculinity something to be ashamed of, and they call it toxic masculinity. And I'm telling you that, I grew up in an era where masculinity was part of growing up. I mean, when we had holiday festivals and stuff, the dads in our area would get together and wrestle and box and stuff like that. And then, so as a culture worldwide, we've kind of taken that away. And I think that does affect the health of men and boys in particular. And the other thing is that people have associated a sedentary lifestyle with the better lifestyle, like you mentioned, with the homes and the devices and things like that. And I don't think that's necessarily better. It's more sedentary. It's more comfortable. So it's easy to live comfortably when you don't get out and do these things. But you made a very good point about like setting a timer and scheduling these things into your day, because otherwise it's not going to happen. And I know, like even up until the 1960s and 70s, there was no real national fitness program other than gym class at school, because when you got out of school as a kid, you went home, you had a snack, did your homework, and then you were out the door to go ride bikes, climb trees, play ball with your friends for 3 or 4 hours until it got dark, and then you came home. And they don't have that anymore. Kids get on a device and they're playing video games for hours instead of riding bikes and climbing trees and stealing their neighbor's apple and stuff. And the other thing is that in other cultures, they've done this scheduling. You know, when I was at NHK Television, they did morning calisthenics, all of the employees, from the president of the company on down. And then they took walks at lunchtime. They had a garden area with a walking loop that they all would walk around at lunch. And so they built it into their company culture to do this. And when I was in Beijing a couple of years ago, one of the grocery stores that I went to, it was huge, like kind of like a super Target or one of those mega Walmarts. And all of a sudden there was this music came on, and you saw all the cashiers started doing these movements and stretching and doing things. And I asked what that was. And when they finished, I asked the cashier what that was. And she said, oh, every 2 hours, the music starts, and for 2 minutes, they do these exercises to stay fresh and healthy. And then they found that by giving up 2 minutes to the music and the exercise every 2 hours, increased the productivity of the cashiers, where they were more efficient, faster, and whatever. And so there's, you know, corporations spend a lot of money to discover this, and why we don't as individuals do it on our own to make sure that we're more productive, especially those of us that are self-employed. You know, we need to maximize our productivity because our families depend on us. But I think that, you know, what you said about scheduling every 90 minutes, I know I have a timer on my cell phone, on the clock on my cell phone. So I'm going to start doing that. And I thank you for the suggestion.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. But, you know, American companies aren't that far off either. They did it in a different format. If you look at some of the Walmarts, if you look at some of the, we have HEB, some of the Targets and stuff, now they have instead of music, they have a fast food restaurant right there. And if you can see it, they have either something that's going to give you a sugar rush or a caffeine boost in the middle of the day. And that's exactly what happens here in the United States. They go over there and they get that big old extra large Coke, and they'll gulp it down within the 10, 15 minutes if they have a little break, and they'll go back in there, and it'll give them a little boost of energy that's going to last them half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. Also, you're going to drop back down. So those programs exist, but we have taken it here in the West as let's sugar them up, and let's let's produce them into a good physical adult, a person that's a little bit more healthier. Understand what I'm saying? That's what happens.
Yep.
Yeah, chemically stimulating them. And yeah, you're right. But I don't think that's the healthy approach. And
No,
as we get ready to wrap things up, I'd like to ask Sifu Fanning to kind of take a little time and share his personal practice beliefs on what the average person can do, like the tip for scheduling. I think that's a great idea. And then the other thing, I know that you have some training tips videos coming up through the World Martial Arts Congress. I'll be sharing those as well. But as far as like this type of training, are there some tips that you can leave us with that will help our viewers?
So, okay, absolutely brilliant. Because one thing I do with a lot of clients is I say, okay, so you got the Sifu's 5-step program. Okay, so 5 steps, and we work this out. Now, each one is individual to the person. Okay, so A lot of people here drink instant coffee, so they must boil a kettle. Okay, so they have to boil a kettle to make their coffee. So say, okay, in that time you boil a kettle, I want you to, most kettles have a marker of how much water's in it. So I said, pick a point on that marker, and every time you boil that kettle, that's exactly where that water must be. So we say 1.5 liters, okay? So 1.5 liters, bang, that's it. Now you know what your water is. When you press start on that kettle, you must do 5 squats. Take a break for 5 seconds, do 5 squats. And by the time the kettle boils, you will have accumulated anywhere from 30, 40, 50 squats, okay? You make your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, whatever. When you make that cup of coffee, we're on to point 2. So point 1 was your squats. Point 2, when you make that cup of coffee, do you put sugar in it? If you take 2 sugars, we're going to cut that down to 1 sugar. That's point 2 taken care of. Now, do you have a biscuit, or do you have a bun, or do you have something with that? A cultural thing here in Ireland is they won't have a cup of tea or coffee without an accompanying biscuit or bun, or something. Sure. So if we say, for instance, they take 2 biscuits, cut that biscuit down to 1. That's 3 points gone. Okay. Now, just doing those 3 things alone will increase your metabolism and will help you get healthier within a matter of weeks. And all you've done is you've halved that, and you've added however many squats. We're going to pick 30 as the number, okay? So then, number 4, when you fill your plate for your dinner, you take 1 scoop of mash, 2 scoops of mash. Do you have meat? Do you have this? Do you have that? What do you drink? Do you drink a soft drink? Do you drink water? So we try and change the soft drink for water, and we take away 1 scoop of mash. Even if it is only 1 scoop of mash, you cut that scoop in half. So that's number 4. There's your 4 things. Your 5th thing then is what you have before bed. So the 5th thing before bed, what they normally say, oh, I'll have a drink, or I'll have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, whatever. So you try and change it so it's something healthy, whether it's I try and say to them, make it a fat. So a healthy fat, a piece of avocado, a couple of nuts, something like that, if they can have nuts. Because now it's a healthy fat is the last thing in their stomach before bed, which helps them burn calories and which helps them burn fat as well. And it gives you a nice metabolism boost. So if you can do that over the course of a day, but what you've got to remember is, how many cups of coffee do they drink a day? Do they drink 5 cups? Do they drink 6 cups? So every time they boil the kettle for that day, they must do their squats. So now you've gone from no squats in a day to suddenly 5 times 30, which is 150 squats per day. Yeah, and plus you've cut off some of your calorie intake, plus you've changed some of your fats and your proteins around, and you've changed some of your carbohydrates around. So that's a 5-point program where you can now suddenly see, after 1 week, you're guaranteed to have lost a little bit of weight, you're feeling a little bit better, you're a little bit healthier, your heart is pumping for those 150 squats per day. And it's a lifestyle change. It's not a diet program. It's not anything. It's a lifestyle change. And if you can do that for 30 days, you can now start to build a habit, because they say it takes 3 days to start a habit, but it takes 3 weeks to form a habit. So that habit now becomes where you're in work and you say, right, well, I'm getting bored with squats. So you make an alternative exercise. It might be, star jumps. It might be press ups, whatever, it doesn't matter. It can be simple. I have had people who have thanked me from across the world for this one, because it's so simple, so basic. It's not a diet plan. It's not anything. And it's not even about losing weight. It's about getting your heart to pump those extra few beats per day, get that blood flowing through your body, and you're also breathing while you're doing it. So you can do your squats. Breathe in as you squat down, exhale as you squat, you stand back up again. So now you're bringing in a bit of Qigong breathing while you're doing a physical exercise, while you're waiting on your kettle to boil to have your cup of coffee. So hopefully.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a great way to do it. A lot of people have trouble quitting cold turkey, but cutting things in half like that is an obvious progressional step. So I thank you for sharing that. And then especially the breathing tip on, because that's a thing of confusion across all exercise platforms is, do you inhale on the exertion or do you exhale on the exertion, whether it's a push-up or a squat or a bench press? So I think that in itself was a very valuable tip, and I thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Thank you
We
very much.
learned a lot, brother. And those are that tip on that you picked up, brother Richard, is a good one. And that is making sure we can put a little timer on everything that we do
Hmm.
and start moving on that,
Yeah.
because number one, that's an A+ on everybody, and everybody needs it. Everybody needs to change just a bunch. That's what we're here for.
Well,
Number
unfortunately, a
one,
lot of people go for the big changes. A change in diet or a change in regime, and New Year's resolutions, whatever, and then all of a sudden they do it for a week and then they stop. Whereas if you can add it in, like you said, set your timer. So set your timer every 2 hours, set your timer for every 3 hours. That for that 3 hours you take 2 minutes for yourself. So my master would have said to me that when you do that, you're now creating 2 minutes for Keith. You're
yeah,
not Keith the father, you're not Keith the husband, you're not Keith the employee, the employer, you're Keith. So for that 2 minutes, it's you and only you. And it's a little bit selfish, but we need to be selfish. If we want to be healthy, we want to have a long life, we need to be healthy. We need to be that little bit selfish for ourselves.
absolutely. And it's also a good idea for those newcomers to come in. You can say, from this time to this time, let's put it at, for example, the class is at 6, put it at 5:30. Let's get ready to go to class. Let's put an alarm. Let's set it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you can start building people to have it more as a habit. Because once it becomes a habit, it's hard to break.
Mhm.
And if it's
Absolutely.
a good one, it's even harder to maintain. So we have to make it up. We have to make it a habit within everything else. Number one, I want to thank both of you all. We're running out of time. And for those folks out there watching, press the subscribe, share. If you have questions, send it to us. You can send it to me at buitronacademy2012@gmail.com, or put it on the bottom. We'll answer it. Or you can send it to Brother Richard Hackworth, and we can go ahead and move it that way, and he'll give you his email right now. But remember, you all stay safe and be safe. Richard, would you like to give your email?
Yeah, sure. It's World Martial Arts. I'm sorry. It's Richard Hackworth in the number 2 at gmail.com. And I just want to thank everybody for watching the Fight for Your Health TV show. And also to let you know that, we're doing this as a project of love to help make the world a healthier and safer place. And, I'd like to personally thank Sifu Fanning for being on today. And if there's anyone out there who's interested in becoming a show sponsor, reach out to us and we'll see what we can do for you. Thank you for watching.
Absolutely. Until next time. Peace.